So, what would you do differently, or how would you enhance AEW to make them not competitive? Are they too focused on beating WWE that they lose track of the end?
And you only get to ask one question at a time. It's the second time you've asked two questions at the same time. Only because I'll forget the second one by the time I get to the first one. What would I do different? Look at story. It's they've got the great production values. They've got an amazing roster. I think where they could make the most progress the most rapidly is with good story.
Long-term storytelling.
Well, it doesn't always have to be long-term. I think some of your story, maybe you have a story, and this is what this is what I'm talking about structure. Go read the book, Hero's Journey. But
I wrote it down.
Good. I hope you did. And you have your A story. Well, you sit down one day and say, we're going to have a 6-month story arc. It's going to begin in June or January. It's going to end in June. Here's the finish I want to see. Here's who I want to see go over. I start there and I start working backwards and lay out all the things that need to happen to keep the audience interested for a period of 6 months. That's an arc. And you strategically place certain elements of the story, the journey, the first part of it, Act 1, starting here. And before I knew it, now I ended up in a fucking jungle. Tigers are chasing me. Now what the fuck? That's Act 2. And you follow that part of that journey until you start setting up the finish and start getting into Act 3. It's the basic storytelling structure. That's the type of thing that I think AEW could use, is more discipline and a more formal structure, because the odds of it being successful are better. But you could have a B story that's a 3-month story. And you could have a C story that's a 1-month story. And you can have a D story because you got enough TV time. You got 2 freaking hours. You can have a D story that's just a hot angle or a weird, unpredicted or unpredictable, confrontation or match that just has no story. That's okay. But if you don't have an A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever you need story, and you don't have a plan, you're just kind of throwing random things at television on a weekly basis and hoping it makes sense and it works. And sometimes it does. 10% of the time. But why not have a formula or a structure in place that would allow you to be successful 50% of the time? And when you are successful, it's a better story and it's more compelling because you've added more detail to it.
Do they rely too much on the cheap heat?
I don't watch the show. I just don't watch the show. I would drop in occasionally for a specific reason, but I don't watch it enough to comment on that.
Well, the reason I bring that up because of the Phil, when Phil first came out on AEW.
Oh, I know what you're. No, that's my bitch. Look, I've never met Phil. I've been very critical of him, and I feel justifiably so. But I've never met him, and I don't really know what kind of person he is. Okay, I know what kind of a professional he is, and I think he's a chump. He lost me because I was excited about him coming to AEW. I was fully on board with the idea, and because I didn't know. And I gave him the benefit of the doubt because he had a lot of steam on him. He had a big mystique. And people talked about him all the time, even after he'd been off TV for 2 years. He still had it. So I was excited about it. Until he came out, and this is where the cheap heat comment comes from. He came out and tried to get himself over by burying Hulk Hogan and talking about what a piece of shit Hulk Hogan is. Number one. You just showed your ass to me as a professional, from one professional to the other, and one that has spent far more time on camera in prime time than Phil ever has. That's showing your ass. That's telling me you don't have anything, because you're reaching in your back pocket for dirt sheet heat. That's all that is dirt sheet heat. You're coming out after all this buildup. And you're supposed to be this Mike God because you delivered a pipe bomb interview. So now I'm supposed to sit back and just be compelled and obsessed with what's about to happen when Phil gets the microphone and we see him for the very first time. And what does he do? He does something that somebody that's been on the indie circuit for 6 months would do, which is just get cheap heat because it's easy and it takes no talent. That's That's where he lost me. And then he dug himself, at least in my opinion, into a deeper ditch when he came out and said something, and again, I'll butcher this. He said something publicly to the effect of his arrival in AEW and the arrival of two other people was more significant to AEW than Hall and Nash and the NWO were to WCW. Okay, Muckerfather, at that point, you're never getting out of that ditch.
Yeah.
Every time he opens his mouth, he reveals more about what he is, which is just a mark for himself. And an indie guy, he doesn't know anything about the business. He couldn't go from the pipe bomb guy that created a big mystique to an actual character that had something and could deliver something fresh and compelling. He relied on dirt sheet heat. It's just, that's where he lost me. But as a human being, I don't know him. Could be a great guy.